I have with me three actors who appear in a new revival of Gore Vidal's famous play, The Best Man, which is set at a political convention in Philadelphia around the year 1960. They're gathered there to nominate a candidate for president of the United States. The party that's holding the convention is never named, actually, but the contest, at least when the play begins, is down to two guys. And remember, this is the 1960s, so there's only two of them. And in the lead is the Secretary of State, a distinguished Secretary of State, played by the wonderful John Malkovich, who is with us today. Hi, John. And he has a campaign manager who's very able and very wily, and he has a trick up his sleeve. He's played by the actor Reed Birney, who's also here. And then the challenger, coming in behind and closing in, is an ambitious U.S. Senator played by Zachary Quinto, and Zachary is also here. So I welcome all three of you, and let's just, this is a play about power, and it becomes clear pretty quickly that one of the candidates, the one played by John Malkovich, is just a good guy. I mean, he's smart, he's principled, he's had a very good education, but the problem is he doesn't seem to lust after the job, and he sometimes doesn't want to do the stuff that people have to do, the nasty things to get jobs like being president. And I think maybe what is being asked in this play is there such a thing as being too good a guy to be president of the United States? Now, John, you've been a president in one film, you've been an assassin of a president, now you're a candidate for president. I wonder, as you approach this role, did you sometimes think that your character maybe was too nice to get the job?
I don't know about nice, but a few years ago, I was writing and rewriting a piece with a colleague in Vienna called Just Call Me God, from the Idi Amin quote. And I played a kind of Saddam Hussein, Muammar Gaddafi, the last day of their reign and everything. And I remember writing a line in it that went something like, "The one thing I know about power is the good never seek it." And that I think is unfortunately not wholly untrue. I think to want power, or what you perceive to be power, even if you think you're wielding it for the good of the others, in this case, say the good of your fellow citizens, etc., the good of your the people who think like you do politically or ethically or morally, etc. I still have a question mark on that myself. So
that must be hard then, to be in the game and worried that you're in the game.
I would think it would be. It's why I wouldn't be in the game. I mean, I'm not planning on being asked anything either.
Well, let me go to Zachary then. So Zachary, he plays this ambitious, bare-knuckled, ruthless senator who's very clearly wants to be president. He has no trouble slinging mud. He says whatever he thinks the public wants to hear. He watches polls to tell him what to do. He doesn't seem to think that deeply about anything, but he does want to be president. He does want to be president. So maybe let's just reverse the question. Do you think Gore Vidal is wondering out loud whether somebody ruthless should also wonder whether he should have the job? Or did you
I think Gore is really exploring the idea of integrity versus ambition in so many ways, ruthlessness versus principles. And I think Joe Cantwell represents somebody who is as ruthless as they come, and not as principled as would be ideal for the position. And yet, you know, we live in a world, and it's so reflective of our modern culture, which I think is such a testament to the power of Gore's writing and his observation of the political system from so long ago, that it's so resonant to today, right? Like, what is more important, integrity or sheer will?
Well, you were in the character. Were you in the character? By the way, who is this little fellow you have in your lap?
This is my little guy Skunk, who is having an anxious moment, and so I'm
Skunk, what's up?
Bringing him along for the conversation. He's got a lot of thoughts on it, right?
You
but
named
yeah,
the
sorry, you
dog
were gonna say.
Skunk. Well,
He
that,
came
that's
named that way. To be fair, I didn't name him. I rescued him, and he already had the name. I thought it fit, so I kept it.
all right. So let me just ask you: was there, when you were playing the role, did you have to convince yourself that you should be the president and bite it hard like a nice piece of meat, or did you?
I think it's Joe to me represents someone who, for whom power is the absolute motivator. Winning is and doing anything that it takes. So it was less about what he was fighting for or what he was struggling to win. I mean, in this case, it happens to be the presidency, but it feels like he's the kind of person that would apply that kind of pressure to anything he's in pursuit of. And therein lies this kind of unscrupulousness that I think is all too familiar in our contemporary world.
Let me go to Reed, because now you are in this play. You're the good guy's campaign manager, but you're a professional politician. So on your own, you've gone out and done a little homework and found some dirt on the bad guy. You seem to be ready to use that dirt if you have to. But then you have to worry that the guy you work for might just be too nice and may not be willing to do the deed. In your character, are you in your heart worrying? Because you're like kind of in the middle. Like, there's a good guy and then there's a bad guy and then there's you.
Yeah.
As you're working this character, are you worried the whole way through? Like, do you not? Because you admire this guy.
It's interesting because it feels like at the beginning of the play, we're in the lead and it's kind of a done deal. Also sounds familiar. And I believe in my guy. I think he is absolutely the best man for the job. But unlike him, he's not willing to do what needs to be done to get the job. So I fall, you're right, between the two. I am willing to do the work and maybe find some unsavory things to do, but in a good cause, to get Joe in there, not Joe, Bill in there, and have him do his magic.
Now, the former president of the United States, a sort of Harry Truman type, says at one point, and it's kind of interesting, he says to the good guy and to you, if you want this job, you're going to have to do some dirty stuff to get it. And if you don't, it's just a beautiful quote. John Malkovich might remember it, but it's something like, if you don't do it, you're never going to get this job and you don't deserve it and you never will get it. And it lies there like a Cassandra-like curse on the good guys in this play. And I thought that was kind of beautiful. But I wonder whether it was fate. John, do you have a sense? Was the Truman character right from the beginning?
Yeah, probably. I mean, Hochstetter is someone who held the office for 8 years, who's very clever, who is knows all the blah 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 and all the sort of backroom deals and all the things that have to happen for people to achieve and retain power. You know, and I was struck also when Zach was mentioning, and something I'd thought about a few times while we were recording, how prescient it was with, if you remember what happened to Eagleton, who many years later, although not that many, I forget if it was 68 or 72, was
basically revealed to have some mental problems, some therapy.
Was revealed to have had, I believe, shock therapy and had some emotional issues and stuff. If I don't misspeak, I think it was.
That's exactly right.
And I remember thinking, of course, you say, oh, is this person, which is at the heart of this play, is this person emotionally unstable, or was this person treated for some issues and just as fine as anybody else, especially a lot of people who pretend to be mentally unstable, who are mentally stable, who are in fact barking mad. But it it's very prescient in that sense, and I think
that raises a question about relevance, because if you go back that far, the play was written in 1959 or 1960, I'm guessing. And at that time, it was considered bad manners and certainly a no-no to talk about another candidate's secret medical history, as you just mentioned, or sex life, or marital infidelity, or old indiscretions, like the guy who was nominated for the Supreme Court and did some bad stuff, maybe way back when. We do live in a very different world. So one of the questions about this is, as you deal with this stuff, do you think that the standards and the mood that Gore Vidal is in is still relevant now? Because so much medical history, sex life, marital infidelity, indiscretions, those are like boom, boom,
well,
boom.
it's, I mean, yeah. We live in a world driven by technology and driven by instant access to information of all kinds, whether it's secret or otherwise. And so I feel like
and whether it's true or false.
Exactly, yeah, especially these days.
It's also a tabloid culture, and so we love all that stuff. When you wouldn't talk about JFK's mistresses, and good luck keeping that secret now.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Well, but it is John's character who says at one point, once this sort of thing starts, there's no end to it, which is why it shouldn't begin.
Yeah.
Does that I mean, you've just said that we live in a technologically driven age where the conversation basically follows the machinery speeds up, the conversation follows. So maybe Gore Vidal is just past it, like this is not relevant to now. Or once this sort of thing starts, there's no end to it, which is why it should never begin. Does that ring loudly in you?
It does.
Well, that could be said. That could be said of technology itself, I think.
Well, that's true.
Sure.
Social media.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
it is odd how he really was like he saw into a crystal ball about what was coming and what in fact has come. And I've seen all the revivals of this play, and when we were working on it, it seemed incredibly more relevant than ever today.
Why?
Because of the mudslinging and the lack of integrity and manners, just plain old-fashioned manners.
Yeah, that's something which, I mean, I'm 66, so I think it's okay to sound like an old codger, but I don't understand where people get off talking to other human beings in the way they talk to them. For instance, okay, so-and-so likes this policy. I understand that. Then we can trot out a bunch of figures and facts and shade them a certain way to show that that policy maybe wasn't as successful as hoped, or maybe wasn't executed as successfully as hoped, etc. But I'm always just astonished in the way people talk to each other, which of course is talking virtually generally, and I don't even know that I'd call it decorum. I would also refer to it as manners. I think there's just certain ways you don't talk to people. You don't show that kind of disrespect for somebody else's beliefs or point of view. But now it's super common. So.
I'm afraid the genie's out of the bottle. I don't know how you get back to a world with manners, honestly.
I don't think you do.
Yeah.
Let me reverse the question, because this is a play that stars politicians and people who are practicing politics, but it's also a play about voters. And the professional politicians in this play, Reed's character and a wonderful character named Sue Ellen Gamage, keep telling the candidates, don't be too smart, don't be too brainy, don't be too clever. Ordinary people are trusted by their view of the public, and smart people seem to turn us off, they say. It's almost like a smart person is inherently shifty. That feeling that persists today about experts and professors and Harvard-trained people seems to be very in the air. And I'm wondering, do you think that Gore Vidal trusts the very core idea of democracy, trusts that people can together be wise every 4 years, or if not every 4, then every other 4? Or do you think that he feels that people are sort of sheep-like and will be driven by the most able politician that can sort of hold their attention? I don't know whether this is a pro-democracy, lowercase d,
Right.
or not so pro-democracy play.
Interesting.
I think he thinks that politicians think the public is stupid and can be manipulated. I think that's what he's writing about, that there's a cynicism amongst the politicians that certainly is present today about the voting public. And it's an indictment of that, I believe.
Was it more fun, Zachary? Was it more fun to be ruthless and an asshole than it is for John to be sort of nice and gentle and fine? I mean, well, as an actor, like, was John jealous of Zachary that he got the nasty part,
sure
or
not.
vice versa?
I had a blast, exploring Cantwell's ruthlessness. But I think that's such a great thing about the play, is it really presents both sides of the coin, and in a delightful way. And I think populates the world not only with the people who uphold these ideals and these perspectives, but also the people around them who are their confidants and their consigliaries, and their litmus tests for how things are working. And I think that's true no matter which side of the coin you're on. So I think we all got to have a little bit of that fun in terms of what we present to the world as characters, and then what our characters are experiencing in their private moments. I think that exists for everybody in this play, which is another testament to Gore's talent.
What about John? Like, did you have to sort of slug through your character, or did you get to enjoy him?
No, I didn't feel like it was a slog at all. I don't know Gore Vidal's writing terrifically well. I haven't read anything of his, I think, outside of Lincoln, maybe. Maybe Myra Breckinridge, actually.
Right.
But I think it's quite a prescient play and an interesting play, and I
was asking fun, though. For you?
Fun was to be had, I think, to try and get your point of view across and try and elicit the responses from the opposing characters that your character would like to elicit. That's always the struggle. And for me, that's always fun. I don't so much mind about their morality or lack thereof.
Yeah.
Let me ask Reed, because Reed, you apparently literally had a face-to-face with Gore Vidal. So I don't know how many of his books you read, but you actually registered with him or something? What happened?
Well, my father went to elementary school with Gore Vidal at St. Albans in Washington, D.C. And so when I was sort of becoming pubescent, it was around the time of Myra Breckinridge, and Vidal was in the news everywhere, his feud with William F. Buckley. And so we heard a lot about Gore Vidal at home, and it was this connection to somebody famous. And Dad would say they would have play dates when they were little boys, and that he felt a little sorry for him, and that he was a terribly odd boy. And then I think they lost touch in junior.
So what was so odd about him?
Well, I think he was he was a little bit like Dill in To Kill a Mockingbird.
Oh,
I think was precocious. And, anyhow, when Gore wrote his autobiography, he talked about how painful St. Albans had been for him, and that there were 5 boys who were nice to him. And he mentioned my father.
Oh, wow.
So, Gore Vidal has sort of figured into my childhood, and Jeff asked me to play Dick Jensen, the part I played in the presentation. in the last revival, and I couldn't because I was going to do Uncle Vanya downtown. And so it actually feels incredibly important and moving to me to get to play it finally. In 2012, when I was offered the part, Jeff set up a face-to-face with Gore.
Okay.
Only a
Richard,
couple of
producer. Yeah.
Jeffrey Richards, right. It was only a couple of months before he died. And it was an amazing morning. We had quite a few Bloody Marys, and he talked very.
For breakfast, you had Bloody Marys?
Yes, I think he had started before I got there.
Yeah.
And he talked very kindly about my dad, and it meant a lot to my dad that I actually got to sit down with Gore Vidal. So it was a big thing. It was a big thing in my life.
Well, let me finish up by asking you some acting questions in this strange post-COVID or mid-COVID world. Is it hard for you guys to perform when you don't share the same space with other actors? Like this particular performance was done in your home, from your home, or from wherever you were staying, and you weren't able to share anything with anyone else. Is that rough, or is that something you can adjust?
I mean, it's an incredibly unique experience. It's not preferable, certainly, to being in the same space as your fellow actors. You know, there are technical considerations. There are a lot of things on the peripheral that we wouldn't normally be concerned with that, you know, require energy and time. I will say that everybody involved in this reading had the patience of Job. You know, gathering this company from all quarters of the globe, basically, and, you know, making it possible, I think, was a real testament to them. And I think there was a real spirit of focusing on the material, the relevance of the material, the value of revisiting the material, and, you know, trying to make something in these challenging times. That to me was the foundation of it from everybody across the board, and hopefully that comes across.
I mean, for one, I was just amazed that, for example, Morgan Freeman was in Mobile, Alabama, and there was, you know, wind whacking the windows. And Malkovich was in New Orleans, looking at his window, waiting for the wind to start the whack. Everybody was, and Reed was in Vancouver, and somebody else was in Warsaw. And I thought, wow, this is so odd.
That's right. Stacey was in,
you know, the closest thing. It's never going to replace live theater. Let's not kid ourselves. But I suppose the closest thing, it's like doing a radio play in a funny way. You know? And there's a value to that.
Was there any happy surprises about being boxed in? Like, is there anything better in this state?
I think I would never say better, but I think it does sensitize you quickly to the people's tone of voice and what's to be read in a tone of voice, which one may not be so sensitive to in a regular rehearsal, because you start recording almost immediately or very soon after reading or two. So you have to be very attuned to what you're hearing and how it's being said. Otherwise, it's not a process I love. This is the third or fourth one I've done. I think it's for a good cause, but it's not something that I would make a habit of.
If you're pleased by what you get to hear, what do you have to look at yourself when you perform? Are you looking at your face? Is that weird? I mean, you don't do that in a stage play. You don't,
at
even
least
in a
for
movie.
me, it's more than weird. It's horrific.
Yeah.
And also, you know, you have to listen to yourself, which is always appalling.
Yeah.
I don't know any actors who like that. But, well, see, the problem is you have to read. But now in Zoom, you don't even look at the Zoom camera, which is here. You look at your phone camera and you have to read at the same time. But under that script are all the actors you're working with. So you can only look at them when they're talking and you shut the hell up for 3 lines or 4 lines. But still, you know, they're little tiny figures. So that's not ideal, but I think it probably does. You just have to play more with the tone of voice.
What about the idea that one day this will end and we will go back to normal? Do any of you think that the normal that will be at all like the normal that has been? Or do you think?
Well, it can't get, whatever the normal is, it can't get here soon enough. I mean, the loss of the theater is something that I think is the most devastating byproduct of this pandemic from a cultural standpoint. That I mean, it really fills me with a deep sadness when I think about the experiences of both being on stage and being the audience of the theater, and knowing that, you know, now we were just talking before we got on this call that things aren't even projected to come back until 2022, and it's just, you know, it's at a time when the vitality of theater could so deeply serve our culture, our society, and give people some relief and some reflection of their experience and the complication of their experience socially and politically right now. It's like the worst time to be bereft of it, but hopefully it approximates some normal that we left behind, because I miss it so deeply.
Mm-hmm. I have a couple of and I'll finish this up. But one of the questions, I guess, is the difference in scale. Like in ordinary theaters I've experienced, you usually walk into a fairly big room and there's 600 or 700 seats, and there's a stage with lots of scenery. So it's all sort of big. One of the thoughts is that, you know, maybe for a while you can afford to be little, but if you get little, then you can't make as much money, and the whole thing just gets smaller. So I guess one of the questions I ask is, like, can the commercial theater or even the regular theater afford to be as little as it needs to be safe?
I think they'll find a way, honestly. Yeah. And I actually think this is a great time to reset in so many ways. But, you know, to be spending $800 on a ticket to see a play is just wrong. Right. Broadway was always the theater of the people, and it stopped being that. And so my hope is that it does go back in some way to more intimate and more personal and more true.
Accessible, yeah.
There was a pageantry that had taken over Broadway that I think is peculiar and
unfortunate.
And I don't know. Didn't
well, my last question.
People, I think.
My last question has to do with masks, because I wonder about masks. So if you are acting in front of a group of people who are wearing masks, or you're sitting in a chair a couple of seats away from another person who's got a mask, that seems funny to me. And I don't know. I think the mask itself, which is so important to keep people feeling safe, might turn out to be the enemy of the play or the theater. It's just an odd thing. And I wonder if have you seen audiences which are masked yet? I guess you haven't.
I've seen pictures
live.
I've seen
pictures. I was on tour in Europe when this came down, and we did Vienna. I did a classical music collaboration with colleagues, and I've done a number of them. And we did Vienna, and Vienna closed the morning after. We did Belgrade, that closed down the morning after. We did Debrecen, Hungary, that closed down the morning after. And we did Istanbul, and that closed down actually the day before. But the Minister of Culture asked us to go ahead, and we did. So there weren't masks, but I think when I was in Vienna, it made me think a great deal. This was early March, end of February, made me think a great deal about the pandemic in 1918 and 19, because if you go to the Applied Arts Museum in Vienna, the MACHT, you see how many designers and painters and et cetera, not to mention writers and on and on and on, who died in 1918. And I remember sitting with my colleagues for a coffee, a Viennese conductor, an organist, and then my colleague was a director writer, and Martin, the conductor, is saying that in 1918, the theaters, concert halls, operas, etc., were closed for 2 years.
2 years. Wow.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So this has happened before, and the world has recovered.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't think the theater. I don't think the New York theater will actually come back until we don't need masks anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's pointless otherwise, because people just sit there thinking they shouldn't laugh, they can't cough, they can't sneeze, they can't sort of be a person, and
can't relax. Just can't relax and watch the play. So
yeah,
right.
So it may end up being 2 years by when it's all said.
I think it may very well read.
We're almost a year in, so it doesn't seem that shocking. What seemed shocking at the beginning of all this was that it would last that long, and now we're halfway, more than halfway into a year, and
Well, as Jeffrey said, they're already talking about next autumn, which puts it almost at 18 months.
Yeah, exactly.
From February, when we should have been awake, or January, till next September is a long, long time. I mean, that's almost 2 years there. And we'll see, I have a gig I'm supposed to do in Madrid in February. And, they're asking me about it now. Will it happen? Will it? And I kind of, I don't know. They're just getting ready to reclose Madrid.
And having just been filming, here in Vancouver and in Toronto, the protocols are rigorous and exhausting.
Yeah, it seemed,
really.
Yeah.
We should tell the audience that what you three, and actually it's a star-studded cast. I mean, as good a guys as the three of you are, and as well-known and as hardworking and as everywhere, the people who surround you in this play are as everywhere as you guys. It's a bizarrely famous. I've never done any acting of any kind, but I had to walk in and just read some lines in this thing. And when I looked at the people who are in the little boxes, I thought, oh my fucking God, like these are, all these people are like so big in these little boxes. And just like, as long as we're in between, I guess people who are watching this should know that this little episode of In Between, this is Gore Vidal's The Best Man, a play about politics and power, performed by a remarkable set of people under rather strange conditions, is coming to you very, very soon for, I think, hardly any money at all. But for we should
create a company called Big People Little Boxes and just do different readings all the time. I think you've coined something here, Robert. Good job.
Well done.
Okay. Well, thank you all for being here.
Thank you.
Great to see you.
Good to see you, John. Good to see you, Reed. Thanks, Robert.
Thanks, everybody.
Stay safe, everyone.
Stay safe. Be well.
Take care.
See you next time.
Bye.